Welcome to True Health Tuesday, and the truth will set you free. Now, this is the key. What is your truth? How do we gauge this stuff? Because right now, your action is required. Okay, if you decide to go along and just things are going to go back to normal, check out New Zealand, check out Australia. Okay, you will be not just house arrested, you will be arrested if you leave your house. Okay, so this is a whole different world. So when we talk about chronic illness and disease, there was an epidemic before this epidemic. Okay, the epidemic was in chronic illness and disease, and we saw it rise massively. And then also these other chronic inflammatory diseases, and you're seeing it all over the board. So if you're in America and you're going to plan on living here for the rest of your life, you will die eventually. I know, go on, say no. Okay, maybe not. Okay, you might be the first person to not. But if you're living in America, statistically, you have about a 1 in 4 chance of dying of heart disease or cancer. About a 1 in 2 chance now of dying of cancer. So if that is the case, and if dying from the current pandemic is less than 1/2% of your possibility of dying, and you have a 25% chance of dying of heart disease, I think, and I'm glad you're sitting down, masks and hazmat suits are appropriate when you go to fast food restaurants, because that area is toxic, okay? And the toxins negatively affect your body. So what is the real death rate? I mean, what should you be concerned with? Well, this is interesting. This is Aldous Huxley, Brave New World, Revisited. Now, this was written back, the original book, back in 1931. Just imagine, close your eyes if you think this guy had a pulse on today. The real hopeless victims of mental illness are to be found among those who appear most normal. They are normal only in relation to the profoundly abnormal society. Their perfect adjustment to the abnormal society is a measure of their mental sickness. These millions of abnormally normal people living without a fuss in a society to which, if they were fully human beings, they not ought to be adjusted. You can say, wow, that's scary, but it is true. See, what your belief is, it's perception, evidence, time. And we have a very, very limited time here to change your perception about reality, because we are going down like hell in a handbasket into New Zealand and Australia to having your entire everything restricted, not just entertainment like movies, restaurants, bars, sporting events, travel that have been taken away from you. And then education, connection, church, okay, social organizations, work, only if you're working in 87% of the businesses that will never open again. So there's a lot of things that are affecting you now, but it can get much, much, much worse. So if you have a belief that there's a deadly virus that's going to attack you and kill you, what is your disease rate? What is your risk rate? And you'll notice the massive posters that I have on the front. This details out, you can actually go in there, find your age, and that's what we're going to talk about today. You're going to find your age and your risk of chronic illness, disease, or the virus that's currently popular. Now, your other belief may be that I have to cover my face in order to protect myself and others. Really? Okay, now where's the perception? The perception is that you're a good citizen. Fantastic. And the belief is that you're at danger somehow. And if you wear this, you're showing others at how you're protecting them. I mean, how magnanimous. That's amazing. Plus, for people that aren't empowered, it puts them in a position of judgment to say, hey, your mask is down. You. Okay, so you could also have a belief like I have a healthy immune system and I don't need to be concerned about a virus. Or you can be an absolute paranoid person and walk around and be afraid of every virus, fungus, bacteria, and airplane that can fall on you. Well, the CDC came out a couple of weeks ago. It's very difficult to find this on their site, but this was the link that was working last week. And what's the difference between dying with a condition or dying from a condition? So let's say that you have high blood pressure, you just had failed chemotherapy, they removed part of your liver, and you have some secondary problems on top of that, like type 2 diabetes, and they just amputated a leg. Okay, now you have all of these different conditions and you die, which makes sense because this is a taxing, chronic, multiple damaging situations, and that could be devastating. But if they find a virus on you, now it doesn't matter because they're not looking for the flu virus. They're not looking for the herpes zoster virus, herpes. They're not looking for these viruses. Nobody got the hairpiece one? Okay. But they're just looking for one set of sequences that is an 80% false positive on a swab. So it's interesting. So a lot of people, and you've seen this over the last few months, how people are being told that they, died in a car accident, but they're considered COVID. They died in a motorcycle accident, they're considered COVID. They had multiple comorbid conditions. Well, this was actually a study. And they found out that the people that actually died that had no other comorbid condition is about 6%. That means the numbers, according to the CDC, are 94% off. That these are people not with this infectious. Now, what kind of data do we have? Well, this data here, and I know it's tough, so I actually printed it up because all of this stuff is live on Facebook now, but it's going to be printed up on YouTube where you can stop and review it. But this is the sheet, and hopefully I'm going to get all the sheet around because this is like the big sheet on the site. But what I want you to see, and this is kind of interesting, is there are 330 million people roughly in America. When you get a group that big together in one place, there's around 2.8 million deaths every year. Okay, that's around 7,700 people are dying every day. So we're talking to have that larger group. This is a normal rate of death. Now, when you're looking at this chart, from 24 years old and below, the numbers on the bottom are the normal death rates that have been recorded since February to May, so a 3-month time frame. So these are the normal death rates, and you'll notice under 1 year old, there's a lot of kids that are dying under a year. And that is because we're damaging the parents, the moms, the congenital anomalies, all the things that since our country is having people with endocrine disruptors that are in the food system, with glyphosates in the food system. We're seeing a mom that's had 72 vaccines mate with a dad who's had 72 vaccines, and we're wondering why mast cell activation is occurring or why inflammatory diseases are occurring. But you'll see the death rates in here, the normal death rates that are occurring that no one's getting upset over, okay? And you'll see a slight rise, okay, in the COVID deaths. Around April, peaking in April and going down. Now, you're also going to see a rise in mortality, the standard mortality not associated with the virus, slowly increase, particularly in the older people. And when you look at that, that's unusual because that usually doesn't happen during the summer months. But what's going on right now? Isolation, poor nutrition. They're having a scurvy epidemic up in Canada because people are not eating correctly and they're locked in their homes. How would you like to have your entire social network, your bridge club, your church group, your gym, walking in the park? All of that stuff has been closed. Now, it's interesting because when you look at the numbers show up and down. Where did I see that before? I showed it to you guys back in February. The Lancet came up with this. And they said, look, a virus goes up, infects a bunch of people, transfers their information, does its job, okay, particularly in the time of the year when people's immune systems are at the weakest. And then when you've reached all the susceptible people, now not everybody is susceptible. You have to reach the susceptible people. That means people who have a weakened immune system or who have never come across this so they can develop a response. Then once you've reached that peak, then the susceptibles go down and death rates, infectious rates, everything go down. We now have a case-demic in our country where we're testing a bunch of people. And it's all it is cases. Of course, I know what you're thinking, 80% false positive on the test. So how can you agree that it's a case-demic? Well, it just is. They're just trying to play it. Now, this is a chart that I changed. Okay, I actually took the data off of this chart and put it onto this chart, only because I think it's real clear this way. And I can't really tell if it's being seen on Facebook, but I think it's cool. Okay, so now what we're looking at is the total deaths on this left-hand column of COVID deaths with and without comorbidities. So this one column, and I got it off of the CDC site, their chart, that one column is the people with and with contributing factors. So that means that they were sick people, they got a virus and died, or they were very, very healthy and died. Now, if you take 6% of that group that died, this is actually the number of people here who died without a comorbidity. Okay, so now you can say, well, gosh, I haven't had parts removed. Okay, I'm relatively healthy. I don't have any medications whatsoever. You exercise on a regular basis. You sleep good. You poop good. You're very healthy. You can work all day long and not get winded. Okay, and you're 80, 85. Okay, what's your risk? Well, healthy 85, you have a 99.5% chance of living. Now, let's look at actual America. Okay, what is America? If you got a 99.5% chance of living, what's your actual death rate? So we've got 330 million people in America, roughly. 2.8 million die every year. 7,700 die every day. So just being alive, if you take that 2.8 million divided into the 330 million, you have a risk of dying of 0.8% every day. Now, that could be frightening, okay, because you have a risk of dying if you're alive. Okay? I know what you're thinking, okay? No, 2 people made it out of death. No, 1 guy had help. That Lazarus guy had help. Okay, so you look at this and you think, so that means I have a 99.2% chance of living. So since we know that, statistically, you have a good chance of getting out. Now, your risk of dying will increase if you have a toxic occupation, if you're taking multiple drugs, if you've had multiple surgeries. If you're not healthy, your risk of dying will be greater. And in fact, you have a 1 in 4 chance that you're going to die of heart disease and a 1 in 2 chance that you could die of cancer. So the death rates are very, very high. It's a 1 in 1 rate of dementia now, too. So normal deaths in America by this time, according to that study, was 902,945 that have died in that 3-month period that the CDC looked at, that we're using the charts on. And that's the normal deaths. Do you hear that? That's the normal deaths. No one got upset over that. Okay, the actual deaths of COVID without a comorbidity in that time frame, okay, it was 4,000. Some people have done calculations and say, look, it's no more than 9,000. Well, this is a study, because can we just use one study? No, we could use the modeling. We can get the great modeling from the Imperial College of London. Oh, wait, that was way wrong. Oh, never mind. Okay, so we could look at other studies that look at different countries. And sure, here's one. They said that without underlying conditions, between 0.7% and 2.6%. And this is looking at Netherlands, Sweden, Georgia. New York's a totally different category. I mean, you couldn't do anything more to promote the disease in New York. You're isolating people, you're scaring people, and then you take the sick people and move them into the old folks' homes where their people are most at risk. We also have data from the Diamond Princess at the beginning of this, and so we had an enclosed area, okay, where people are sharing food, sharing the air, sharing everything, and they were like quarantined, and 3,711 people were there. They had 712 of them infected. Okay, so that's about 20% infectious rate. So we're thinking, wow, this looks like a virus. That's it. That's it. It's not going to elevate your blood sugar. It's not going to clump blood cells together. It doesn't balance your checkbook. It's not going to date your girlfriend. Okay, this is just a freaking virus. Okay, and out of this, there were 7 people that died. Okay, 6 of them were between 70 and 79. Now, 6 deaths are bad, but there were over 1,000 people in that age category. And when you're looking at 80 to 89, 1 person died out of 216. So if the governments did not need to shut down the world economy and take control of your lives and wipe out our, Constitution, all they would have to do is look at this and say, wow, we should protect the vulnerables. This Academy of Ideas is just brilliant. I encourage you to go onto their site. I don't know if I can attribute this to them, okay, but I think it was from them. It's just one of those things I copied down and I forgot where I got it from. But listen to this for today. In a flourishing society, conformative society can be considered healthy. In a society that's corrupted, scared, sick population, conforming to this society, it will corrupt and delay healthy development in its population. Adapting to a sick society produces sickness. Conforming to a mad world produces madness. Society becomes a departure from normality, and normality becomes insanity. Associating mental health with conformity, if a society is in a major type of a people, too much conformity can produce some unhealthy psychological and behavioral rigidity that sets up the conformist for great suffering should they be living in a time of chaos. That is us now. You have to make a stand now. If you want to wear a mask, beautiful, go for it. But for God's sake, when you're alone, look at the data. Okay? Take it off and get fresh air. You're putting your body under oxidative stress, and it doesn't make sense. You're conforming to something that you're not at risk for. You're not protecting anyone. Go back to church. The way we get the stuff back is to act as if. Strengthen your immune system and let's get together. Right now, and these are the stats. You're not seeing a virus up here because it's not a big contributing factor to the overall mortality rate. Cancer and heart disease are. So if you had a government that actually wanted to protect you, that cared about your health, they would not be subsidizing agricultural that's toxic to your system. They would actually be promoting healthy activities. So we need to take this back. First, I want you to have wonderment. For one, you guys are all the fastest sperm, so that's cool. Okay, you guys got there first, okay? Formed your body. Thank you, good. Okay, but when you look at it, it's a miracle. You get that sperm piercing the egg, and then it just magic happens. And I mean, you figure we're really advanced in science? No, we're not, okay? Haven't a friggin' clue. We know some things stem cells can convert into anything. We don't know what stimulus causes them to do that. You can put them in different growth mediums and they'll grow different things. But it's like a little computer. When you see what a live blood cell analysis does, you're going to see an ecosystem and a drop of blood. And that's just one drop out of your body. It's the most cool thing. B.J. Palmer thought about this because when we get done with this completely medical industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us of, okay, when we get done with this and we break off and we're able to have freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of choice, freedom of science, We're not rushing for a vaccine that everyone's going to be forced into. No, the world is going to go back into harmony. And then we're going to look at the energetic aspect of humans. Okay, not that, oh gosh, you got a cancer, you got diabetes, you got the heart disease. Okay, don't worry, it runs in your family. No, it doesn't. Okay, you're human. This is the top notch, man. This is the apex predator here. Okay, we chiropractors work with the subtle substance of the soul. We release the imprisoned impulse, that tiny rivulet of force that emanates from the mind, flows over the nerve cells and stirs into life. We deal with the majestic power that transforms common food into living matter. I mean, that's going to be the future. The future is not diagnosing a disease. The future will be looking at your physical, chemical, and emotional stress load to find out why you acquired this, why you needed to go through this process. And then they're going to look for the toxicity, deficiency, and other aspects of your health at how you developed the disease. Let's just look at the brain. Your brain weighs 2 to 3 pounds. You're talking it burns 30% of the body's calories, 90% of the body's oxygen, but movement triggers it. Now you might think, well, the brain is really important unless you're a politician. And you'd be right. So this brain requires movement to get stimulation. Okay, and breathing. So we're doing certain practices now that are weakening that immune system. So what kind of things negatively affect the immune system? When we know vaccines, medication, environmental toxins, non-GMOs, nutritional deficiencies, and chronic stress. The key is your body views every stress has physical, chemical, or emotional stress in like a fight or flight fashion, the sympathetic. We have this automatic nervous system. One part keeps you alive under stress, and that's the sympathetic. And that means your body is in a stress state. So what do you think we're doing to our kids in school wearing a mask saying that you can't play? We're putting them in a sympathetic dominant state. Now, if they're 5 or 6 years old, they've had around 38 to 45 vaccines. So each one of these things is triggering an inflammatory response. So we trigger an inflammatory response in the kids, okay, with multiple injections. We feed them a diet, healthy, organic, plant-based. No, man, chicken nuggets, baby. Okay, so you're talking neurotransmitters, okay, bovine growth hormone in the cheeses, okay, but they love it. Okay, so all of this is going to transfer into frontal lobe dysfunction. Got a couple of patients today. One of them was a teacher for 25 years, and I said, well, wow. And you could ask this of any teacher. If they've been teaching more than 20 years, you just say, you've seen the change, haven't you? And what do? Just what you did. Look down at the ground and go, yeah, yep. Because we're looking at frontal lobe dysfunction. This is anxiety, stress, and impulse control. These kids are not, you can't blame parents, but you can blame the environment, the inflammation. And so we've got physical, chemical, and emotional stress. That's what you have to deal with. So if you're confronted with a chronic illness or injury, like about 65 to 70% of our population is, and I'm talking before this psychosis. Further understanding the regulatory mechanisms linking the sympathetic and parasympathetic and immune system is critical for understanding relations between chronic disease development and immune system associated changes. Absolutely it is. Because when you have that physical, chemical, emotional stress, digestive is affected. So can you be in a stress state and have reflux? Absolutely. Okay. Is it from proton pump inhibitor deficiency syndrome? Should you get some Zantac? Should you take baking soda? Should you completely change your diet? Because how many animals on our planet are allergic to their own environment? Oh, nobody? Except the inbred animals that we've created? Okay. Vaccinations. Okay, this is a taboo subject, like you can't talk about vitamin C, you can't talk about vaccinations. So I'm just going to present data from the National Institute of Health, the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta, and multiple journals around the world, okay, because I can't actually say it. But if they go in COVID-19 severity in Europe, could the seasonal influenza vaccine play a role? And they actually asked this. because since you're getting a vaccine and this can trigger an inflammatory response, and does anyone remember back in 1976? No, I was the only one alive back then. Okay, there was a thing called a swine flu. Okay, and one person, a soldier was exercised and died from it, and that panicked the world. They ended up producing this vaccine at breakneck speed, and luckily, all the vaccine companies assured us it was safe. And those guys are cool. Okay, so it killed a lot more people than had died from the flu. So we knew, and then it was pulled off of the market. And then the H1N1 came out. Okay, back in 2009. And then there was a lot of spontaneous abortions. There was a lot of negative responses to that. So these people using that data, and then you could also look at the H1N1, the narcolepsy that went through Europe, particularly in Finland, after the flu shot. So all of this stuff is just in data, but that gives them the reason why they wanted to look into it. We found statistically significant positive correlations between the VCR, vaccine recipients, vaccine coverage rate, and reported COVID incidence, as well as mortality for Europe and the USA. Our analysis indicates that receiving the seasonal influenza vaccine in the past might be an additional risk factor for the elderly in terms of enhanced susceptibility to infection for the SARS-CoV-2 and higher likelihood of a lethal outcome in case of infection. That's interesting. So that if you get the flu shot, you're more predisposed to get the COVID, but also you're more predisposed to have a negative response, which kind of makes sense because back in 2003, when SARS first came out, and they knew these zoonotic viruses because our animal husbandry practices are despicable. They're bad for the animal, they're bad for the product, and they're bad for people. So, we create an environment where we're funneling poisonous molds in there and packing animals in. So torturing the animals is creating these unique viruses. I mean, I don't have a pet pig or anything, but I still think that they're living creatures and we should maybe take care of them. So we know that environment can create very, very toxic, dangerous viruses, funguses, and pathogens. So we're seeing it get to fruition now. Now, here's another one, though. And because back in SARS, they realized that this is going to be one of a series of coronaviruses, because that's what grows in these concentrating animal feeding operations. But they found a problem with the vaccine, that if they injected it, all the animals developed an antibody response, except when they were exposed to the virus, they had multiple organ system failure. I mean, a lot of really bad stuff happened. But don't worry, the current rush to vaccine of the COVID, they're assuring everyone. They actually came out with a statement today that they said they're not going to sacrifice safety. Well, here's an article that came out a couple of days ago. The United Nations says the new polio outbreak in Sudan is caused by the oral polio vaccines. Now, I know, Doc, you're going in like, duh, that we stopped that in this country because it was causing polio. Okay, that's why we exported it. So, no, seriously, this is the world you're living in. That's why we have to take a stand and take charge of it. The World Health Organization said it found 11 additional vaccine-derived polio cases in Sudan. The virus had been identified from environmental samples. See, when you get the oral polio vaccine, it's an enteric virus. It grows in the intestinal tract. You're pooping it out. So if you have an area that doesn't have enclosed sewer or good sewage treatment plants, you can spread it rapidly. In rare instances, I like that, rare, the live poliovirus in the oral vaccine can mutate into a form capable of sparking new outbreaks. And last week, the World Health Organization and its partners declared that African continent was free of wild poliovirus, an incredible and emotional day. Except, on Monday, the World Health Organization warned that the risk of further spread of vaccine-derived polio across Central Africa and the Horn of Africa was high, noting the large-scale population movements. More than a dozen African countries are currently battling outbreaks of polio. Remember, there's no more wild polio there, caused by the virus, including Angola, Congo, Nigeria, and Zambia. So we know that the vaccine, the flu vaccine, can predispose you to getting other viral infections, but it turns out that the polio vaccine is causing polio, according to AP News. I think they're pretty. I mean, of course, we got, in a vaccine world like in America, if you get damage from the polio shot, or you get damage from the flu shot, or you get damage from measles, mumps, and rubella shot, or you get any of those damages, you cannot sue the company. Okay, since 1986, they absolved the liability of it. And don't worry in a pandemic, because I know you're concerned about the company that's producing these toxic, dangerous vaccines, that they might injure a few people and lose their... No, they can't be sued either. So don't worry about it. You can sue the companies for producing a product like Zantac that has a cancer-causing agent, but you can't sue for vaccines. And this is interesting. I just pulled this slide up from an old talk comparing vaccinated, unvaccinated kids. And we're seeing a rise in all sorts of inflammatory diseases from in our population. Could vaccines be contributing to it? Absolutely. Okay, could the toxic diet, could the over-medication of our children be contributing to it? Absolutely. But listen to this. When doctors cannot predict who will be harmed by a vaccine and cannot guarantee that those who have been vaccinated won't get infected or transmit infection, the ethical principle of informed consent becomes a civil, human, and parental right that must be safeguarded in the U.S. law. I like that. Won't happen, but I like it. Why? Because you cannot give authority to parents to decide what's good for their children. The government has to take that over. Adverse effects of vaccines, evidence, and causality. And again, because if you think that yeah, okay, the vaccine or the pharmaceutical industry screwed up on Zantac, they also screwed up on Vioxx, which killed more people than the Vietnam War. All you got to do is look at any drug out there and type in drug lawsuit. Bam, you're going to see how many people are being damaged by it. But this is out of the National Institute of Health on the MMR vaccine. Vaccine febrile seizures, well-identified mechanisms of hypersensitivity reactions convincingly support the conclusions regarding anaphylaxis and 6 vaccines: MMR, varicella, influenza, Hep B, meningococcal, and tetanus. It turns out that we're seeing a massive inflammatory response, and this is the mast cell inflammation in a lot of these patients with a chronic illness or disease. Now this is something that should be everywhere. I mean, like the COVID stuff, okay, that you're seeing it all the time, everywhere. Everybody's frightened of it. Okay, in 2000, 21% of our adult population had a chronic illness or disease. 14 years later, 60,000. Okay, that's a 300% increase there. So did you hear that on the news? Knowing that these patients in hospitals have inflammatory or mast cell or cytokine storms. Have you heard the cytokine storms? Yeah, according to Frontiers in Science, blood-brain barrier associated with pro-inflammatory cytokines and neuroinflammation and neurodegeneration. And this is disruption of the blood-brain barrier. There's not many substances that can cause that, but neurotoxins can. Mast cell activation induces glial cell activation, neuroinflammation, and stress responses. See, all of these things are showing inflammatory responses. Inflammation, you have to have tissue damage, and inflammation is part of the healing process. Last week, we talked about how inflammation heals, and this is showing that something is damaging the tissue. Could it be physical, chemical, and emotional stress? Yeah, you got to look into it. Aluminum is a neurotoxin, and this can actually directly link to dementia. It can cross the blood-brain barrier, which isn't fully formed until you're a teenager anyway. The aluminum that's in virtually every shot, there's a couple of shots that don't have the aluminum adjuvants in there, but this alters DNA, gene expression, damaged cell membrane, coagulates proteins. I mean, it's some damaging stuff. We also have glyphosates in our system that are an herbicide but it's in the water, it's in the air, it's in your gut, it's in every bit of bread that they're going to desiccate. And I got to tell you, with the food shortages coming up, this is going to be really, really popular in a lot of packaged foods. The problem is, if you're eating this stuff, depression. Why depression? Because it's destroying the gut flora, and that's where neurotransmitters are made. What about DNA damage, neurotoxicity? Oh, that's where neurotransmitters are produced. This is dangerous stuff. Now, if it's going to kill the bacteria in your gut, yeast can grow like crazy, and yeast can bore holes in the intestinal tract. And you get an intestinal tract that looks all black like that on the left. That's because it's expanded out, filled with air, damaged tissue, but at least you can heal it. Now, what do they do for these inflammatory responses? Okay, and I'm talking inflammatory diseases like skin rashes. Okay, what about asthma? All of these inflammatory diseases that you see everywhere, inflammatory bowel disease. What do you give? Something to decrease inflammation, like a corticosteroid. However, increased glucocorticosteroids increase risk of suicidal behavior and neuropsychiatric disorders. Look at the people that are at these demonstrations. They got these wild eyes. I mean, and they're just repeating the same slogans. And when you question them, you know, why are you saying this? There's no answer. I mean, this is really frontal lobe problems. We know Tylenol depletes glutathione, and glutathione protects the brain. We know cholesterol-lowering drugs, if you take them, they cause increased heart failure and hardening of the arteries. Why? Because high cholesterol isn't a disease, it's an adaptation to chronic stress. Blood pressure, high blood pressure is not a disease, it's an adaptation to a chronic stress. This is why if you take a medication to lower your blood pressure, your risk of stroke goes up 30%. If you take 3 medications, you're at a 248% increase in stroke. Why? Because you're not addressing the stressors, you're drugging the symptoms, and bringing this stressed individual, you're making his blood pressure go lower. Okay, let's look at the brain. You got the frontal lobe here, and this is where the students are getting destroyed in most of our population. Anxiety, stress, depression, and impulse control. Now that frontal lobe is controlled by the cerebellum. The cerebellum gets its information from movement. So if you happen to have abnormal movement, now this is the side view of a neck. You've got a normal neck in the middle, and you got a reverse curve on either side. That's going to get abhorrent stimulation up into the brain. Is that going to put the brain into stress? Yes or yes? It has to. Cerebellar stimulation influences frontal cortical functioning. And this is going to be schizophrenia, Tourette's, everything. But movement triggers it. And I know what you're thinking of. Didn't we eliminate gym class from schools? Yes. What is going to happen to this group of kids? Exercise. Super important for everybody. You've got to move every joint every day. But it affects the brain. It affects the immune system. You're talking increasing blood flow to the brain, increasing oxygen to the brain. And yes, you have seen people, honest to God, with a mask on, riding bikes. Raise your hand if you've seen that. Okay, raise your hand if you look down at the ground and said, oh, good God.
Not wear a helmet, but have a mask on.
Okay, well, yeah, he is protected. He just said it wearing a face mask, but no helmet. Crazy. So exercise helps moderate all the functions. I mean, you can see studies that exercise helps lower blood pressure. No, it doesn't. It allows your body to move itself. You're moving the lymph. You're getting stimulation up here. The movement has a calming effect on you. You know, think how many people are bouncing their leg or moving a little bit. Okay, that's to generate dopamine. I mean, it's a good defense mechanism. Walking barefoot on your grass or hard sand, this gets massive stimulus to the brain. But walking and exercise is one of the greatest things you can do to reverse chronic disease and illness. And so what do? You avoid the stuff that causes it. You avoid the vaccines, medication, toxic food, processed foods, processed sugars. If your great-grandma didn't eat it, you don't either. Okay? I mean, we're just talking basic sense. Vitamin D. It's very important for you. You need it. If you're not getting outside or you live north of the border, north of the equator too far, you got to supplement. You just have to supplement. I mean, super important. produces serotonin in the brain, so it has a calming effect, immune system. Omega-3s are vitally important for brain function. You can get them in, small fish oil. Anchovy, mackerel, or sardine is the best if you have a religious where you cannot eat animals. Flaxseed oil is good, but you got to actually do about 4 times the amount of that oil in order to get the same effect. You need healthy saturated fats, okay, and I mean absolutely important. This is a beautiful book. Man, if you can get this, Phospholipid Spectrum Disorders in Psychiatry and Neurology. If you have any questions about omega-3s, this is probably the best book you're ever going to read. Okay, and we're talking direct effect on it. And what is our population exposed to? A huge amount of an imbalance of those omega-3 ratios. Huge amount. Oh, Journal of Affective Disorders thinks omega-3s might explain why the rate of depression is rising in America. Now, that was in 1998. Okay. Yeah, depression rising now, forget about it. Okay, sleep. So you need to get your structure corrected. You need to get movement. You need to get appropriate nutrients in the system and not poison yourself. You need to get deep sleep. Look at some of our videos. Your body, you can reset those circadian rhythms within 5 days. Drugs, if you're taking a chemical to alter your physiology, that entire system is called dysfunctional. Okay, if we're seeing the African polio epidemic, okay, now being caused by the therapy used to control it. Okay, wait, let me word that again. Okay, if we're seeing the continent of Africa, which is a big place, okay, not have any more wild polio, but the polio there is continuing because of the therapies we forced on the population, or you could say we brought it over to them. Okay, perhaps that isn't the best solution. Cleaning up the sewage, providing healthy water and environments, that is a lot more expensive, but a lot more effective long term. But if you're altering your stress response with a chemical, like a blood pressure drug, beta blocker, ACE inhibitor, diuretic, your immune system is going to be weak. If you're taking antacids, we know those types, some of them cause cancer. We need cold medications, corticosteroids. We know that damages the brain function. So the entire system of taking a drug to deal with the symptom is not effective. It's not correct. It's using a false precept. Sleep mastery, check our videos on that. Meditation, if you get a few minutes of meditation, what happens? Your parasympathetic nervous system kicks in. A few minutes of your body rebuilding itself. And I got to tell you, this is something, prayer and meditation, super important. Harvard, Yale, MIT, our data suggests that meditation practice can promote cortical plasticity in adults and, more important, for cognitive and emotional processing as well as well-being. There was a really cool, I think it was on 60 Minutes, this one area in the middle of America where they have a school that they do transcendental meditation. And it is actually an entire community. Amazing. Amazing. Since we've wiped out lunch time or socialing with our school kids, and we've wiped out all the sports programs and wiped out recess, by the way, what if we do a group meditation? That'd be kind of cool. And vitamin D, fermented foods. So what is your philosophy? Should you be afraid of a disease, knowing that you have a 99.2% chance of not dying? If you have a comorbid condition, okay, and you've had multiple traumas, you have a minuscule chance. Okay, so what do you want to do? Do you want to walk around in fear or strengthen your immune system? This is what we need to do to change our planet. We need to take care of, clean up the food system. Now, the food system, we're going to have massive food shortages, massive, coming up in the next few months. So please stock up. Look at seeds. Look at growing in your garage. Look at grow lights. Okay, look at borrowing a neighbor's property to see if maybe they're not healthy enough to work the soil. Okay, look at the square foot guarding method by Mel Bartholomew. I love that guy. I mean, we had just 4 foot by 4 foot sections, 4 of them, at this little tiny beach house, and I was feeding me and my 2 kids with about 80% of our stuff. And we got to clean up healthcare. That means you get a symptom, you find out why the symptom's there. You don't take a drug for it. If a doctor is going to do that, you fire him, because that's ridiculous. Environment, we got to live in more harmony with the world, absolutely. That's why finding these small enclaves off the grid that we can survive in is a good idea. If you think that LA with 15 million people in there, 20% of them are going to be homeless, all the businesses are shut down, and the checks are going to stop soon, and we have fires, and we have the worst air quality in the world, and there's a heat wave going on, and there's going to be power shortages. Oh, did I mention the gun stores are still open, but the churches are closed? Okay, so if you could avoid Los Angeles for probably the next few months, that would be a smart. Except I've got friends up there, and I've got to go up there anyway. So, just be cautious. Politics. You got 2 candidates. One of them said he's not going to quit even if he doesn't get elected. This has never been done in America. We've had a transition of administrations for forever. Okay, so you're looking at the end of the end. And the infrastructure. When you look at the absolute printing of money, what is it, $100,000 a minute or $100,000 a second, I think it is, that they're printing. This is not free money. This is a tax on your savings. So if you have money in savings, it's worth less. Don't comply. Don't comply with the ridiculous requirements and use data. I'll give you all the handouts we possibly can have. The handout that you have now is really good because it shows what your risk is. So when you get that 24-year-old panicked with her eyes like this, saying you're trying to kill grandma, okay, you say, look, this is the actual risk. You are not at risk. Here's some data on masks that is not helping you. Here's some data on social distancing. You were actually designed to live here. You're living in fear, and the fear is the only thing that you should be afraid of. All of this stuff is going to be put on YouTube in a week, maybe. Okay, because now we're going back into the most censored group ever. I mean, North Korea looks more liberal than America right now. So if you say anything about the COVID, hopefully I'm not putting in the title, so the censors, I mean, will you show them your papers? I know. Censorship is now super common. You can't talk about vaccines, vitamin C, hydrochloroquine, or any of this stuff, and they wipe you out. So will it be put on next week? I have no friggin' idea. Okay, go to Extreme Health Academy. Get in there for a couple of weeks for nothing. Go to BitChute. Okay, we're trying to put all of our videos on there, except with over 1,000 videos, it takes a while. And I don't really like the way BitChute lays out, but at least it's not censored. We got to take back our health. We got to take back our planet. Okay, and God, I'd love to take back the country because it was such a good idea. The Bill of Privileges. The Bill of Rights that are inalienable. They can never take it away from you. They were taken away from you. So that's enough. They broke the bargain. I'm done with it. Okay. Next week. Yeah, that's like a mic drop. Next week, we're going to get more into how to reverse disease. Thank you very much.